The Midware Cordon Training System for Grapevines, Grape video number 7. This video presents specific information about one training system only, the Midware Cordon Training System. In our previous video, we discussed principles of grapevine training. This presentation assumes a familiarity with the grapevine terminology presented in Grape videos 1 to 5. Here is a schematic of the Midware Cordon training system showing the cordon at a 42-inch height above the ground. That is a comfortable height for pruning and for hand harvest of the fruit. But not all grapevines need to be trained at that height to utilize Midware Cordon training. This is a picture in the Marche region of Italy showing the pull-behind harvester harvesting grapes with a Midware cordon at about 30 inches from the ground. That's an important consideration when mechanically harvesting or even hand harvesting, that the cordon not be placed too low so that the harvester cannot get under the cordon, or that harvesters have to bend over too much to pick the crop when it's too low. So the height of a Midware cordon typically will range anywhere from about 30 inches up to about 42 inches. Here is one variation of a Midware cordon training system utilizing an extended post so that the whole trellis is 8 feet tall with 2-foot post extensions. The Midware cordon is at 42 inches with several sets of fixed catch wires going up the trellis. The point of this schematic is to indicate that between the Midware cordon and the first set of catch wires we have a distance of about 8 inches. I strongly advocate that the first set of catch wires be no more than 8 inches above the cordon. Otherwise, too many of the shoots will not easily be caught in those catch wires, and you will have to go back repeatedly to get them placed inside the catch wire system. If you place the first set of catch wires even 12 inches above the cordon, there will be more difficulty in starting the upward positioning of the shoots. The Midware Cordon training system has some synonyms or other names for the same training system. One of these is the most common name used for this training system, VSP, or vertically shoot positioned. This is a misnomer. This is an incorrect use of the term because vertically shoot position does not describe the training system. It describes the canopy management practice of placing shoots on the trellis in a vertical position as they grow during the growing season. So even though VSP is a common descriptor for Midware cordon training, it is an incorrect use of that term. California sprawl is another name sometimes given to the Midware cordon training system. Let's now look at several advantages of Midware cordon training and why this training system is so very popular. First of all, it has a very easy establishment process. Here again is the trellis with a wire configuration that we showed originally. This would be the most straightforward, simple establishment of midwire cordon with a single trunk in the middle of the vine space, as shown here, that reaches just below the wire that you're going to use for midwire cordon system. Then we would establish two cordons, typically what we call bilaterally, or one in each direction, to cover the vine space. In this case, we're looking at a 6-foot vine spacing with a cordon established 3 feet in each direction. Ideally, we would place 2 node spurs along that cordon the year after establishment so that they would be spaced about 5 inches apart. They would each have 2 nodes on them, as indicated here, so that when the shoots grow out from each of those 2 nodes on each spur, we have something like this. And we have an ideal arrangement of a shoot about every 2.5 inches, or about 5 shoots per foot of trellis. This will create an ideal shoot density, an ideal canopy density for the performance of the grapevine. Another advantage of midwire cordon training is the ease of pruning. It's very easy to prune this vine because we're just spur pruning it. Here is out of focus an old photo I have of a California vineyard from years and years ago with midwire cordon training. And the point of this slide is to show you that there are rows in California vineyards that go to the horizon, and I think beyond. They go forever. And it is possible to have an inexperienced pruner go out in the morning and start to spur prune these vines with a short lopper and just prune one row for the whole day and wind up at the other end of the row in the evening where someone picks the person up to take them home. But it is not very complicated to understand the spur pruning process along a midwire cordon, and it does not take highly skilled labor to perform this task. Here's a short 14-inch lopper of the type that can be used to prune midwire cordon trained vines with spur pruning. And using a short lopper like this is so much better than using a hand pruning shears. It is much less tiring, and the pruner can go along with this short lopper and prune in a sustained way much longer than if he or she were using a hand pruning shear. Not only is it easier to perform the task of spur pruning, but it allows for greater maneuverability amidst the canes arising from that cordon. So give that a try if you haven't done that before. Get a short lopper and try that when pruning midwire cordon trained vines. A third advantage of midwire cordon training is that it is very mechanizable. Here is a palenque pruner, and if you look behind the tractor, you can see the area that has already been pruned, so that there is just a pre-pruning process here to take care of most of the cane material on the trellis and remove it, and then there will be a hand follow-up procedure to completely prune the vine out so that it will be ready for the growing season. But this pre-pruner does a lot of the work ahead of the hand pruning and does the job of brush pulling, which is very, very time consuming when done by hand. This is a creative mechanized approach to midwire cordon training management as performed years ago by Mr. Paul Lewis in the Finger Lakes region of New York. His son would come home from high school in the afternoon and drive the tractor, and Paul would take the big old McCulloch chainsaw hung from a spring from an old post pounder and go along and buzz off, sort of like the plank pruner, but in a much less complicated way, a lot of the brush, and then he would go along during the day and finish the pruning job by hand, making the whole task much easier than if he were to do it completely manually. A fourth advantage of midwire cordon training is its compatibility with canopy management practices such as leaf removal and shoe positioning. Here are vines of Cabernet Franc that have been vertically shoe positioned between catch wires, and they have had leaf removal performed around the clusters. It makes for an excellent system. And those tasks, especially the leaf removal, can be mechanized, at least partially so. Here is the variety Barbera, is grown at the Southwest Michigan Research and Extension Center, and you can see that leaf removal has been performed in the fruit zone to expose that fruit to the sunlight, and that the shoots have been vertically positioned upward. Unfortunately, there are disadvantages too to the midwire cordon training system, and that's why it is not universally utilized in all vineyards. One of the disadvantages is that it can produce a congested fruit zone that can lead to reduced fruitfulness of nodes. That congested fruit zone can also result in poor fruit quality due to the congestion of fruit and the ability or inability to keep a good spray pattern on the fruit. Here is a California vineyard. Once again, one of my old slides from years ago, but you can see just looking down the row this California sprawl aspect to it, and that the fruit beneath, although there's been leaf removal performed around the clusters, the fruit is still highly shaded because of this California sprawl architecture from these midwire cordon train vines. There's another picture taken in California vineyards, and the picture on the left shows a very, very dense Sauvignon Blanc grapevine in the Robert Mondavi vineyard prior to leaf removal in the fruit zone. And then on the right, you have the same vineyard with leaf removal performed around the clusters so that the fruit is now exposed. It was in this time period of the 80s, and in this vineyard and others, where the whole concept and the whole procedure for leaf removal was born. And rightfully so, that midwire cordon training, although it has many advantages, can create this congested area along the cordon of canopy that is dense, of fruit that is congested, so that clusters lay one upon another and make it difficult to control diseases on the fruit. This is a picture of Riesling grapevines in a vineyard in southwest Michigan in 2008. In 2008, in that September, we had 12 inches of rain. Oh my gosh, was that a mess. And if you looked underneath those leaves along that midway cordon, you'd see this. Lots of rotting fruit. Isn't that a mess? That was such a disheartening loss of crop in that year where we had this situation. Clusters developing in the shade of the canopy are much more susceptible to fruit rot than clusters developing in the sun. This is a picture in the same vineyard in the same year, and you can see how clean the fruit is relative to that rotten mess we just showed you a couple moments ago. That means that when we're using midway or cordon, it's really, really important to perform leaf removal. Here's a closer picture. That fruit is not perfect, but it's certainly much better than where we had fruit developing in the shade along a midway or cordon without leaf removal. So, when we say that there's congested fruit zones with midway or cordon, and it can lead to reduced node fruitfulness, poor fruit quality, and fruit rot, that all adds up to the importance of leaf removal. When you use midway or cordon training, it is essential to perform leaf removal in the fruit zone to have the performance of the vines so that you get quality fruit year after year after year. Another disadvantage of midway or cordon is the tendency to make cordons too long. Here's that schematic we showed you originally, and there are the two node spurs as they're placed at 5 inches apart on the schematic. If we look at that in the real world, here is a cane that has been placed out a trellis wire. And the first thing to point out is that when you establish a cordon, do not wrap the canes too tight. We're advocating that you only wrap one full wrap around the wire, no more than 18 inches in length along the cordon. Because if you wrap them too tight, you're going to have problems in the years ahead when you want to get the cordon off the wire. And when that grows out for a year, here's what we have. A young cordon with canes that have been previously positioned shoots upwards, and they're not exactly at 5 inches apart, but they're more like 6 inches apart, and this is the start of a very nice cordon along a midwayer of the trellis. And here's what that young cordon might look like after it has been pruned out to two node spurs. Everything looking orderly, nice, healthy trunks, nice, healthy spurs along a young cordon. Ideally, we place two node spurs about 5 inches apart. But you can see, even in this situation of some Cabernet Franc vines on cordons that are about 3 to 4 years old, we have a situation where there's congested fruit in some areas and very little fruit in others. If we take a closer look, here's a portion of that cordon that is about 4 years old, and instead of getting two node spurs uniformly placed along that cordon, we are getting many shoots in one place, probably from pruning cuts along that cordon, so that we have many shoots. We have one there, another one here, third one here, fourth one here, fifth, sixth, 7 shoots all coming out of about the same place on the cordon. And that's leading to congestion of leaf canopy, had we not pulled the leaves off to take this picture, and of clusters on clusters. And this is getting away from our idealized look at what we think a midway or cordon should look like. This is a California vineyard with a midway or cordon that may be 15 to 20 years old. And we can begin to see another problem that's developing here, and that is that we are getting the occurrence of spurs that are climbing up the trellis by placing spurs on spurs on spurs over the years, so that the fruiting spurs are getting up and away from the actual cordon. Here's a picture showing how that happens. Originally, we may have pruned this vine with a spur where the light green line is, and then the next year, off of that spur, we prune where there's the orange line, and then the next year, we pruned off of that another spur, and that led to the red lined area of a 2-node spur. And then this coming year, if we continue this process, we'll prune off of that red spur where we have the dark blue. And gradually, that whole spurring process, spurs on spurs on spurs, lead to what I'd call climbing spurs. So we get the fruiting of the vine up and away from the cordon. Here's an extreme case in Napa Valley, a picture I took years ago, where the cordons were not renewed for a very long time, so that the fruitfulness along the cordons so diminished that they had to leave long canes to make up enough fruitfulness to fruit the vine each year. I'm told those long canes were known as kicker canes, and I was told that they were called kicker canes because they're the nodes that kick out the crop each year. Well, when you have a situation like this, you no longer have midway or cordon training. You have something that's evolved into something different with long cane pruning. And the time to renew those cordons occurred years and years before this picture was taken. Here is a midway or cordon after about 10 to 15 years, and the base buds that develop along the cordon from pruning wounds will grow out along with the shoots from spurs to create a very congested situation like this. Certainly, we're not looking at a density of 2-node spurs at 5 to 6 inches apart. No, things are getting out of control, and even with the best efforts to prune, there are so many base buds from pruning wounds along this cordon that we're going to get an excess of shoots developing during the season, which means either a lot of work to thin out those shoots or a highly congested canopy and a highly congested fruit zone. Here is a photo of a midwinter cordon in a California vineyard that was mechanically pruned, and you can see that the concept of a midwinter cordon with two node spurs spaced 5 to 6 inches apart has been totally lost, and it is way overdue for this cordon to be replaced. We won't cover cordon renewal in this video. We will cover that in detail in an upcoming video. For now, we'll just conclude that one of the problems with midwinter cordon is that it can lead the grower into complacency where he or she does not replace the cordons often enough, and we start to get problems as we've shown you in the past several photos. And then another disadvantage of midwinter cordon for those vineyards in cold climates is that it's really not suitable where there is frequent winter injury to trunks and cordons. Here's a picture of a Riesling vineyard in the Traverse City, Michigan area after a very severe winter. And almost all of the shoot growth is occurring near the base of the vine. Why? Because there was 16 inches of snowpack when the low winter temperatures hit this vineyard, and only the buds under that snowpack survived reliably well. When something like this happens, and if it happens with frequency, efforts to establish a midwinter cordon will be frustrating. You might have 2, 3, 4 years where you don't have winter injury problems, you get the cordon nicely established, you have another episode of winter injury, and you're starting over again. When that happens, midwinter cordon training will not be suitable for a vineyard that gets somewhat frequent severe winter injury. Here is a situation with winter injury in a vineyard that has heavy clay, waterlogged soils where the trunks don't last many years. If they don't last many years, and you've got to bring up trunk renewal canes like this frequently to reestablish the vine, this would not be a candidate for midwinter cordon training. Here's a picture of a vine in such a heavy clay soil. You can see that one of the trunks on the midwinter cordon is young and has life to it, whereas the other trunk that's not that old, perhaps 3 to 4 years old, has already succumbed to crown gall near the ground, and that cordon on the left is dead. And it's dead because we have a situation where the site, the climate, and the variety together add up to frequent winter injury, and this is not a situation that lends itself to midwinter cordon for a stable, sustainable growth form for that vine. Well, that concludes our discussion of the midwinter cordon training system. There are several advantages to this training system that is very popular. They include, it is easy to establish this training system, it is easy to prune, and there is no time when you're spur pruning this training system. It's mechanizable. You can mechanically prune, you can mechanically do leaf removal and other tasks to this training system. It is compatible with canopy management, such as leaf removal and vertical shoot positioning. There are disadvantages to the midwire cordon training system, and they include a congested fruit and renewal zone that can be a problem with renewing the vine in terms of its fruitfulness, with the quality of the fruit, with the onset of fruit rots, and therefore leaf removal is mandatory when you use this training system. Another disadvantage is the tendency to procrastinate on cordon renewal, and that can lead to problems years down the road. And finally, it is not suitable when there is frequent winter injury to use this training system. Well, we thank you for your attention. We hope that some of the information presented here will help you in your grape growing. In our next video, we'll talk about the French training system known as Guillot. Take care and happy grape growing.